Yeah, I signed the loan in her name. She won't know the difference. You heard that, didn't you? That voice, calm, smug, like a man who just won the game and thought no one was watching the board. But she was. She was right there, behind the curtain. Breath held, heart stopped. And that voice, that monster's voice, it didn't belong to the man she loved. It belonged to the stranger she'd slept beside for 8 years. Let me tell you what happened next. The mall smelled like sugar and desperation. It was Friday. The kind of Friday where the fluorescent lights hummed too loud, where mothers dragged tired children past discount racks, where men in wrinkled shirts scrolled through their phones like they were searching for a lifeline, and where Layla Vance, 42, accountant, widow in all but name, walked in like a ghost already half gone. She didn't want to be there. But the coat, her old coat, was falling apart. The sleeves had frayed into spiderweb threads, the lining had split down the spine like a wound that would refuse to heal, and the color, once a rich, earthy green, now a sickly, faded gray, like the last breath of a summer that never came back. She'd worn it every day for 4 years, not because she liked it, because it was safe, because it didn't ask for anything. Just like Marcus. She pushed through the automatic doors, the warm air wrapping around her like a lie. You deserve this. One thing just for you. No one else would notice. No one else would care. And that was the problem. Because Marcus had stopped caring. He'd stopped asking how her day was. Stopped noticing when she wore the same sweater for 3 days straight. Stopped looking at her when she spoke. He'd become a silhouette in their home, present but hollow. She told herself it was stress. He was a project manager, high pressure, long hours, that's all. She didn't see the perfume on his collar, didn't notice the way he always left his phone face down, didn't question the business trips that always coincided with the full moon, and she never, ever checked the bank statements because he'd smiled that quiet, steady smile and said, "Let me handle it, sweetheart. You work hard enough. You deserve to rest." And she believed him. God help her. She believed him. So she walked past the glittering jewelry counters, past the kids screaming for candy, past the scent of fresh baked croissants from the cafe, something Marcus used to buy her every Sunday. She didn't even remember the last time he brought her coffee. She found the boutique, navy blue, cinched waist, silk-lined, a coat that didn't look like armor. It looked like her. The kind of coat she'd worn if she'd ever dared to be someone else. The sales associate, bright-eyed, name tag reading Jada, greeted her like she was a queen. "Good evening. Can I help you find something?" Layla didn't smile. She didn't need to. She just held up the coat in the window. "I want that one." Jada beamed. "Oh, that's our best seller. You have exquisite taste." Layla didn't believe in taste. She believed in survival. She slipped into the fitting room. The curtain closed with a soft shh. The lights inside were warm, gentle. She took off her jacket, slid the new coat over her shoulders. It fit, like it was made for her. Not the woman she was, the woman she could be. And then a voice, loud, laughing, from the next room. Her husband's voice. "Stop it, baby. It's fine. I'm telling you, she won't figure it out." Layla froze. Her fingers, still on the buttons, went numb. The coat slipped from her grip. She didn't move, didn't breathe. Her whole body turned to ice. That voice, she'd heard it every morning for 8 years. The low rumble when he woke up. The soft chuckle when he teased her about forgetting her keys. The tired sigh after a long day. But this was different. This was happy. And it wasn't for her. It was for her. The mistress. The girl. The woman who didn't have to pretend. Layla's mind didn't scream. It didn't cry. It didn't panic. It clicked. Like a lock turning. A door opening. And behind it, a truth so brutal it stole her breath. She didn't move, didn't turn, didn't scream. Instead, her hand slid into her purse, fingers trembling, fingertips brushing cold metal. Her phone. She pulled it out, unlocked it, opened the voice recorder, pressed the red button. It vibrated. One soft pulse. The recording began. And then the voice returned. The loan is done. The money's already on the cart under her name, naturally. Layla's knees buckled. She sank onto the little stool. Her eyes locked on the curtain, separating her from the man who had stolen her life. My credit is trash after that car incident, remember? But Layla's is spotless, clean as a whistle. She didn't know she had a credit score. She didn't even know he'd even looked. The bank didn't even really check the documents, just for show. They called once, confirmed the details, and that was it. The money was transferred. $45,000. She heard it, clear as a bell. $45,000. Gone. Taken. In her name. And he was laughing. Laughing like he just pulled off the perfect heist. She won't even find out. You know how she is. She don't look at paperwork. She trusts me with everything. A sob clawed its way up her throat. She swallowed it hard. I slipped her a few documents to sign, told her they were forms for my job, so she signed them without looking. She remembered. 3 years ago, he came home with a stack of papers. Just some HR stuff. They need me to sign these for the company's insurance. Nothing big. She signed them without looking. Because he looked so tired. Because she loved him. Because she thought he was protecting her. And now she understood. He wasn't protecting her. He was preparing her for this, for the lie, for the theft, for the betrayal. I'm just going to take her debit card and transfer the money to the bank. I'll tell her it's for utilities or something else. She never checks. She remembered the cash envelopes, the monthly allowance he'd hand her, $400, $500, sometimes $600. Groceries, gas, little treats. And she'd take it like a child, never asking, never doubting. Because love, she thought, meant trusting. She'd been wrong. So wrong. The woman's voice chimed in. Bright, young, careless. How much did you end up getting anyway? Marcus laughed. $45,000 for 3 years. Payments are only $1,500 a month. She won't even notice. Layla closed her eyes. $45,000. That was the cost of her silence, the price of her trust, the value of her life. And he'd sold it. Like a car. Like a couch. Like a coat she'd outgrown. She felt nothing. No rage. No tears. Just hollow. Like someone had reached inside her chest and pulled out her heartbeat and left a vacuum. The curtain rustled. Footsteps. Laughter. Let's go. I still need to look at that dress, the red one I saw in the window. Let's go. I'll buy you a dress that will make everyone jealous and shoes to match. A clutch. There's plenty for everything. Don't you worry. Layla didn't move, didn't speak, didn't cry. She just sat, staring at the red circle on her phone screen. 2 minutes, 32 seconds. He'd just confessed to fraud, to theft, to adultery, to planning to leave her, and he'd done it in a women's clothing store. While his wife tried on a new coat, she pressed pause, saved the file. Layla Vance. Her name on the screen. In the recording. Proof. She stood slowly. Her legs didn't feel like hers. She took off the coat, hung it back on the rack, put on her jacket, picked up her purse, and then she pulled open the curtain, stepped out, and there he was, Marcus, smiling, laughing, armed with his mistress, Tiana, dressed in black, lips red, nails sharp, eyes gleaming like she'd already won. Marcus turned, saw her. His smile vanished, as if someone had wiped it off with a sponge. His face went white. His mouth opened. No sound came out. Tiana froze. Her eyes darted between them. Layla didn't speak, didn't scream, didn't cry. She just held up her phone. The screen glowed. The red recording icon pulsed like a heartbeat, like a warning. I recorded it, she whispered. And in that moment, the man she loved became a stranger. The life she built became a lie. And the woman she'd been died right there, on the floor of a mall, in front of a coat she'd never buy, because now she didn't need a new coat. She needed a new life. The taxi ride home was a blur of streetlights and rain-smeared windows. Leela didn't cry. Not then. Not in the back seat, with the driver humming along to a radio station she didn't recognize. Not when she fumbled with her keys, her fingers stiff and clumsy, as if they belonged to someone else. Not even when the deadbolts clicked into place. Thunk, thunk, thunk. One after another, sealing her inside a house that no longer felt like hers. She stood in the foyer, coat still on, purse still slung over her shoulder, phone still clutched in her trembling hand. The silence was the worst part. Not the quiet of an empty home, but the aftermath silence. The kind that follows a scream that never came. The kind that settles like ash after a fire you didn't start, but had to live in. She kicked off her shoes. The carpet was soft, warm. The same one Marcus had picked out. It's cozy, he said, like walking on a cloud. She'd rolled her eyes then. Now, she wanted to rip it out. She walked slowly through the living room, the couch where they'd watched movies, the coffee table with the chipped corner she'd never fixed because he said it adds character. The bookshelf filled with novels she'd never read because he said, you work too hard. Just rest. Rest. She'd rested, and he'd stolen. She moved into the kitchen. The microwave beeped softly. Midnight snack from last night, forgotten. The fridge hummed. The clock on the wall ticked. Tick, tick, tick. Each second a hammer blow. She opened the fridge. Milk. Leftovers. A bottle of wine, half empty. The label read, celebration. He'd bought it for their 5th anniversary. She'd opened it. He'd drunk it all. She slammed the door. Then she went to the bedroom. It was cold. She hadn't turned on the heat. She didn't remember why. Maybe she'd been too numb to care. Maybe she'd known even then that he wouldn't be coming home. She sat on the edge of the bed. The duvet was still rumpled from where he'd left it. She could still smell him, his cologne, faint, almost sweet, like cedar and something else. Something synthetic. Not his. Not the one he wore before. Tiana's. She stood abruptly. She didn't want to be in this room. Not anymore. She walked to the closet, opened the bottom drawer, the one where they kept the important papers, passports, marriage certificate, car titles, insurance documents. She pulled them all out, dumped them onto the bed. Then she went to his desk, the oak one he insisted on buying because it looked professional. She'd never gone through it, never opened his drawers, never checked his emails, never asked for passwords. He said, "I've got it covered, sweetheart. You don't need to worry." She believed him. God, how she believed him. She pulled open the top drawer. Pens, sticky notes, a stack of envelopes, and one. White. Unmarked. Sealed. Her breath stopped. She reached for it. Her fingers shook. She tore it open. Inside, a single sheet of paper. Bold header at the top. Consumer Loan Agreement. Lender, Fidelity Consumer Finance. Borrower, Leela Vance. Loan amount, $45,000. Term, 36 months. Monthly payment, $1,500. Disbursement date, October 23rd, 2025. Signature, forged. Her name, her ID number, her social security, and beneath it, a signature. Not hers. Not even close. It was almost hers. Same slant, same loop on the L, but heavier, stronger, more confident, like a man who knew he could get away with it. She dropped the paper. It fluttered to the floor like a dead leaf. She sank into the chair. Her head throbbed. Her chest ached. She didn't cry. She didn't scream. She just stared at the ceiling. And then it hit her. Not just the loan, not just the mistress, not just the lies about Atlanta, Miami, Cancun. It was the pattern, the slow, silent erosion, the way he'd taken over her finances 3 years ago. Let me handle it. You've got enough on your plate. The way he'd started paying her allowance in cash. It's easier. No bank fees. No tracking. The way he stopped asking about her day. The way he stopped holding her hand. The way he stopped looking at her. She hadn't noticed because she'd been too tired, too grateful, too loving. She thought love meant silence, that trust meant not asking, that devotion meant giving up your voice. And he'd taken it all, every piece, every dollar, every dream. She pulled out her phone again. The recording. Still playing, still alive. She pressed play. His voice filled the room. She won't figure it out. She doesn't look at paperwork. She trusts me with everything.
I slipped her a few documents to sign. She signed them without looking. I'll just take her debit card and transfer the money. She never checks. She won't even notice. She won't know the difference. Each word was a knife. Each pause, a wound. She stopped the recording, saved it again, named it The Truth. Then she opened her browser.
How to file a fraud report. Read, saved, printed. She didn't sleep. She sat, at the desk, at the kitchen table, on the floor, just sitting, waiting for the world to catch up, waiting for the tears, waiting for the rage, waiting for the moment when the woman who'd been Layla Vance, quiet, dutiful, trusting, would finally die, and the woman who would rise from her ashes would be someone else. The alarm went off at 6:15 a.m. She didn't turn it off. She didn't move. It rang, again and again. She finally reached out, slapped it silent, sat up. Her eyes were dry. Her face was pale. She looked like someone who'd been buried alive. She walked to the bathroom, turned on the light, stared into the mirror. Who was that? Dark circles, lips cracked, hair tangled, eyes hollow. Not sad, not angry, empty. She turned on the faucet, splashed cold water on her face. Then she opened the medicine cabinet, pulled out her toothbrush, brushed her teeth, put on a robe, made coffee, black. No sugar, no cream, just bitter, just real. She sat at the kitchen table, the loan agreement, the printed fraud report, the phone, the recording. She spread them out like evidence at a trial. She was the prosecutor, the victim, and the jury. She opened her laptop, went to the bank's website, found the contact number, called. The automated voice chirped, "Welcome to Fidelity Bank. Press 1 for checking accounts. Press 2 for loans. Press 0 to speak with a representative." She pressed 0. Waited. Then, a woman's voice. "Good morning. You've reached Fidelity Bank. My name is Denise. How may I help you?" Layla took a breath. Her voice didn't shake. It was flat, calm, dead. "My name is Layla Vance. I believe a loan was taken out in my name without my knowledge. I need to file a fraud report." Silence. Then, "I'm so sorry to hear that, Ms. Vance. Can you please confirm your date of birth and social security number?" She gave it. Another pause. Keys clicking. Then, "Yes, there is a consumer loan under your name for $45,000 issued October 23rd. Layla closed her eyes. 3 days ago. He'd done it while she was at work, while she was drowning in spreadsheets, while she was pretending everything was fine. "I didn't sign for this," Layla said. "The signature is forged." "Understood," Denise said, her tone shifting. Professional, serious. "We will need you to come into the branch with your government-issued ID and a signed affidavit stating you did not authorize this loan. We will then initiate a forensic signature analysis. If confirmed, the loan will be nullified, and we will forward the case to our fraud department and law enforcement." "When can I come in?" "First thing tomorrow morning. We open at 9. If you come early, you can avoid the line." "I'll be there." She hung up. Then she opened her browser again, typed "police fraud report template," found one, printed it, filled it out, handwritten, every detail. Date, October 23rd, 2025. Location, Willow Creek Mall, 2nd floor, boutique clothing store. Perpetrator, Marcus Vance. Husband, residing at 1472 Maplewood Drive. Crime, identity theft, forgery of legal documents, fraudulent loan acquisition. Evidence, audio recording, signed loan agreement, bank statements. She signed it. Her name. Real, true, final. She tucked the papers into a manila folder. Then she walked to the closet, pulled out her gym bag, started packing. Jeans, sweaters, underwear, toothbrush, phone charger, her passport,
her marriage certificate, the loan agreement, the recording, everything. She wasn't staying. Not tonight, not ever again. She didn't know where she was going, but she knew she couldn't sleep in that bed. Not after hearing his voice. Not after knowing what he'd done. She zipped the bag, slung it over her shoulder, picked up the folder, walked to the front door, paused, looked back at the living room, the kitchen, the hallway, the bedroom, the home. The lie. She opened the door, stepped out, locked it, turned the key 3 times. Thunk, thunk, thunk. This time, it wasn't to keep him out. It was to keep herself safe from the past. She walked to the curb, hailed a taxi. The driver asked, "Where to?" She didn't answer. She just looked out the window as the city blurred past.
And whispered, "Take me to my sister's." Imani's apartment smelled like cinnamon and old books. The door opened before Layla could even knock. Imani stood there, barefoot, in a faded robe, hair in a messy bun, eyes wide. "Oh my God," she breathed. Then she pulled Layla inside, hugged her, tight, like she'd been holding her breath for days. "You're shaking," Imani murmured. Layla didn't answer. She just let herself be held, let the tears come. Not sobs, not wails, just silent, heavy, endless streams. Imani didn't ask questions. She led her to the couch, put on tea, sat beside her, waited. Layla didn't speak for 10 minutes. Then, she pulled out her phone, pressed play. Marcus's voice filled the room. "She won't figure it out. The money's already on the card under her name, naturally. She trusts me with everything. I slipped her a few documents to sign. She signed them without looking. We'll be in Cancun in 2 weeks. I'll just take her debit card and transfer the money. She never checks. She won't know the difference." Imani sat perfectly still. Her face didn't change. Not at first. Then, her jaw clenched, her eyes narrowed, her fingers curled into fists. When the recording ended, she didn't cry. She didn't scream. She stood up, walked to the kitchen, picked up a glass, threw it against the wall. It shattered. Shards flew, ceramic fragments scattered like teeth. Then she turned, looked at Layla. Her voice was ice. "I always knew something was off. I told you he was too quiet. I told you he never asked about your day. I told you he never looked at you the way he used to. You said it was stress. You said he was just tired. You said you didn't want to make a scene. You said you loved him." She stepped forward, took Layla's face in her hands. "You didn't lose him, Layla. He lost himself. And you didn't lose your marriage. You just woke up." Layla looked at her sister, really looked, for the first time in years. Not of the woman who'd always been there, but as the woman who'd seen, who'd known, who'd waited, who'd been afraid to say it, because she didn't want to be wrong, because she didn't want to be the jealous wife, because she didn't want to ruin the family. Imani wiped Layla's tears with her thumb. "Tomorrow," she said, "we go to the bank. Then, we go to the police. Then, we burn this house down. And you start living." Layla nodded. She didn't feel strong. She didn't feel brave. But she felt real. For the first time since she'd walked out of that fitting room, she felt like herself. Not the wife, not the victim, not the fool. Just Layla. Alone. And finally, awake. The next morning, they arrived at the bank at 8:45 a.m. The doors opened at 9. They were the first. A woman in a navy suit, Mr. Howard, met them in a private office. He listened. Without interruption, without judgment. He reviewed the documents, played the recording, closed his eyes. Then he looked at Layla. "This," he said, "is textbook identity theft." He didn't just steal money.
He stole your identity, your trust, your dignity. We'll run the signature analysis. It'll take 5 to 7 business days, but I can tell you now, this is forged. You're not responsible for this debt, and we will press charges. Layla signed the affidavit, gave them 5 samples of her handwriting, left the bank with a folder, and a new name, victim, not wife, not Layla Vance, the accountant, not Layla Vance, the quiet woman who trusted too much, Layla Vance, victim of fraud. They drove to the police station. The detective, a man with tired eyes and a worn badge, listened. He didn't offer platitudes, didn't say, "I'm sorry for your loss." He said, "This is a felony. Forgery, fraud, identity theft. He's looking at probation, maybe jail." He took the report, the documents, the recording. "We'll issue a summons. He'll be called in for questioning. If he denies it, we'll subpoena his phone records, his bank statements, his travel history. We'll find Tiana. We'll find the receipts for Cancun. We'll find the dress, and we'll make him pay." Layla didn't cry. She didn't smile. She just nodded and walked out, into the cold, into the light. Imani put her arm around her. "You did it," she whispered. "Now we wait." Layla looked up at the sky. Gray, clear. A single bird flew overhead. Free. She whispered back, "No. Now I begin."
The rain started the morning Marcus was summoned to the bank. Not a gentle spring drizzle, not a cleansing shower, but a hard, insistent downpour, like the sky knew what was coming and refused to look away. Layla stood just outside Fidelity Bank's glass doors, hidden beneath the awning, watching through the rain-streaked glass as he walked in. He looked smaller than she remembered, his shoulders slumped under a soaked navy blazer, the same one he'd worn to their 5th anniversary dinner. His hair, usually slicked back with precision, clung to his forehead in limp strands. He kept glancing over his shoulder, as if expecting someone to stop him or arrest him. But no one did, because justice doesn't always come with sirens. Sometimes it comes in silence, with a folder and a forged signature. She didn't go in with him. She didn't need to. Mr. Howard, the bank's fraud specialist, had already told her, "We'll call you the moment it's done." So she waited, not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. She needed to see the moment the mask cracked, and it did. 10 minutes in, she watched through the glass as Marcus sat across from Mr. Howard in a private office. His hands, usually so steady, trembled as he reached for the documents. Mr. Howard slid a single sheet across the desk, the loan agreement, then another, then a side-by-side comparison, Layla's authenticated signature samples, and the one on the loan. Even from 20 feet away, she could see his breath catch. His face went slack. His mouth opened, but nothing came out. He looked up, wild-eyed, and scanned the room. His gaze landed on the window, on her. Their eyes locked. For the first time since the fitting room, he had nowhere to hide. She didn't flinch. She didn't smirk. She just held his stare until he looked away, ashamed, broken, exposed. The recording had been truth in sound. This was truth in ink, and ink doesn't lie. Mr. Howard called her an hour later. "Miss Vance," he admitted it. She sat on a bench across the street, steam rising from a paper cup of black coffee she hadn't touched. He didn't deny the forgery. He claimed financial desperation, but he signed a sworn affidavit confirming he forged your signature, applied for the loan without your knowledge, and used your social security number and ID. Layla closed her eyes. "The case is closed on our end," he said. "We've nullified the loan, all debt is void, and we forwarded everything to the district attorney." She thanked him, hung up, and finally took a sip of coffee. Cold, bitter, real. Justice wasn't sweet. It was necessary. That same afternoon, she returned to the condo, not to live, not to mourn, but to reclaim. She'd given Amani the spare key, and her sister had already boxed up most of Layla's clothes, books, and personal items. But there were things only she could take, things only she could leave behind. She opened the bedroom closet. Inside hung Marcus's suits, neat, pressed, expensive. She didn't touch them. She went to the nightstand, pulled out the bottom drawer, found the velvet box, her wedding ring. She'd taken it off the night of the mall, tucked it into a sock drawer. She'd forgotten about it. Now she held it in her palm. Gold. Simple. Beautiful. A symbol of 8 years of devotion and 1 night of betrayal. She didn't cry. She walked to the kitchen, opened the trash can, dropped it in. Then she paused, changed her mind, pulled it back out. Not because she wanted it, but because it wasn't trash. It was evidence of what she'd survived. She placed it in her purse, not to wear, but to remember. At 3:15 p.m., her phone buzzed. Unknown number. I know what you're doing. You're trying to ruin me. I'll tell everyone you were crazy, that you made it all up. She stared at the message, then typed one word. Proof. Sent. Blocked the number. It was the last text she'd ever received from him. The police called the next morning. Detective Johnson, same one who'd taken her report, sounded weary but firm. We've issued a formal summons. He's required to appear Monday at 10 a.m. for questioning. If he fails to show, we'll issue a bench warrant. Will he go to jail? She asked. Possibly. Forgery of a financial instrument is a Class C felony, up to 5 years. But given it's his first offense and the victim is his wife, probation is more likely, if he pleads guilty.
She didn't want him in prison. She wanted him seen. Wanted the world to know that trust isn't a weakness. It's a gift. And he'd stolen it like a thief in the night. Monday arrived. She didn't go to the precinct. She went to work. For the first time in weeks, she sat at her desk without shaking. She opened her spreadsheet, typed numbers, answered emails. Her boss, Ms. Lee, stopped by at lunch. You look lighter, she said, leaning against the cubicle wall. Layla smiled. I feel it. Whatever you're doing, keep doing it. She nodded. Because healing wasn't dramatic. It wasn't a courtroom. It was showing up, on time, with your head high, even when your heart was still learning how to beat on its own. That evening, Imani brought takeout and a bottle of wine to Layla's temporary apartment, the one she'd rented just 2 weeks ago, a small but sunlit 1-bedroom with a fire escape and a view of old oaks. He showed up, Imani said, handing her a container of curry. At the precinct, pale as a ghost. Did he confess? Fully. Admitted to the forgery, the loan, the mistress, the fake trips, even the condo scheme. She stirred her food. He asked if you'd dropped the charges. She looked up. And what did they say? The detective said, that's not how felony fraud works, sir. Layla laughed. A real, surprised laugh. It felt like birds taking flight in her chest. She said, good. Not vindictive. Just final. 2 days later, a certified letter arrived. From Marcus. She almost threw it away unopened, but curiosity won. Inside, a single page, handwritten. Layla, I know you'll never forgive me, and I don't deserve it, but I'm sorry. Not just for Tiana, but for making you doubt yourself, for making you think your kindness was weakness. You were never naive, you were just good. And I use that against you. I'll sign the divorce papers. I'll sell the condo. I'll pay the restitution. Not because I have to, but because you deserve to be free of me. I hope one day you find someone who sees your light and doesn't try to dim it. Marcus. She read it twice, then tucked it into the back of her journal, not as a plea, but as a tombstone for the man she thought he was. The divorce papers came next. She signed them without hesitation. No drama, no counterclaims, just a clean break. The condo sold in 10 days, $260,000 total. She got $130,000, enough for a down payment, enough for a fresh start. She found an apartment on the east side, quiet, 3rd floor, hardwood floors, a balcony. She moved in alone, unpacked her books, hung her photos, placed the African violet Imani gave her on the windowsill, and for the first time in 8 years, she slept without checking if he was home. But the real turning point, he came on a Tuesday. She was walking home from work, passing a community center. A flyer in the window caught her eye. Beginner Spanish starts next week, no experience needed. She'd always wanted to learn. Marcus had said, "What's the point? You'll never use it." She stepped inside, signed up, paid in cash, and walked out feeling like someone new. That Friday after class, a man approached her. Tall, glasses, kind eyes. "You work in accounting, right?" he asked. She nodded, wary. "I'm Julian. We met last year, briefly, when my company signed a contract with your firm." She remembered. Polite, efficient, quiet. "I'm also divorced," he said, not as an excuse, but as shared ground. "I'm just starting over like you." They talked about language, about cities, about how sometimes endings are just doors in disguise. He didn't ask for her number. He asked if she'd like coffee after next week's class. She said yes. Not because she was ready for love, but because she was ready for possibility. That night, she sat on her balcony. City lights shimmered below. No lies, no secret. Just silence and her own thoughts finally trusted. She pulled out her journal, wrote, "Today I chose myself, not out of anger, but out of love, for the woman who walked out of that fitting room and never looked back." She closed the book, looked up at the stars, and whispered. Spring arrived not with a fanfare, but with quiet insistence. One morning, Leela woke to the sound of birds, not the distant honk of city traffic, not the muffled thump of a neighbor's TV through the wall, but real, living birds, perched in the old oaks outside her window, singing as if they too had something to celebrate. She sat up slowly, wrapped in the soft blanket Imani had gifted her on moving day, for the new you, she'd said, and looked around her bedroom. No traces of Marcus remained, not in the sheets, not in the scent, not in the silence. Just light, just air, just herself. And for the first time in years, that was enough. Spanish class had become her sanctuary. Not because she loved verbs or subjunctive moods, though she surprised herself by enjoying them,
but because in that room, she wasn't the betrayed wife or the victim of fraud. She was Leela, a student, a listener, a woman who said, "Buenos dias," with a slight smile, and asked questions without fear of being dismissed. Her classmates were kind, Julian especially. He never hovered, never pushed. He simply showed up with coffee in hand, textbook tucked under his arm, and a quiet steadiness that didn't demand anything, but offered everything. One evening, after a particularly tricky lesson on past participles, they lingered outside the community center as rain began to fall, soft, misty droplets that turned the streetlights into halos. "You're getting really good," Julian said, holding his umbrella over them both. Leela laughed. "I still mix up Ser and a star." "Everyone does, even natives." She looked at him then, not as the man who might replace Marcus, but as someone entirely new. Someone who asked how her day was and actually waited for the answer, who remembered she took her tea with one sugar, who never checked his phone when they talked. "Why are you doing this?" she asked suddenly. Julian tilted his head. "Doing what?" "Being patient, kind, present." He didn't flinch, didn't deflect. He met her eyes. "Because I see you," he said simply. "Not your past, not your pain, just you. And you deserve someone who sees you." She didn't cry, but something inside her softened, like ice giving way to spring. That weekend, Amani dragged her to a small art fair downtown. Booths lined the street, watercolor landscapes, handmade jewelry, ceramic mugs with affirmations like, "You are enough," and "Breathe." Leela lingered at a stall selling notebooks with hand-stitched bindings. She picked one up, deep blue, like the coat she'd tried on that day at the mall. The vendor, an older woman with silver braids and paint-smudged fingers, smiled. "That one's special. The paper's made from recycled cotton. It holds ink like a memory." Leela bought it. That night, she opened the first page and wrote, "List. Things I'm reclaiming. 1. My name, not as a signature on a forged loan, but as a promise to myself. 2. My time, not wasted waiting for someone to love me, but spent building a life I love. 3. My voice, not silenced by he'll explain, but used to say, this is mine. 4. My trust, not given blindly, but offered slowly to those who earn it. 5. My future, not shaped by his lies, but written by my own hand." She closed the notebook, placed it on her nightstand, and slept without dreams for the first time in months. The restitution payment came in full the following week. $10,000. A pittance compared to the betrayal. But symbolically, it was everything. She didn't spend it. She opened a new savings account, just Leela, and deposited every cent. Then she called Shayla. "I'm in," she said. "For the Caribbean? Yes! Nicole's already booked the villa. 3 bedrooms, private beach, rum punch on arrival." Leela smiled. Perfect. She'd never been to the ocean. Marcus had always said, it's overrated, too crowded, too expensive. Now she'd see for herself. But the real test came one rainy Thursday. She was grocery shopping when she turned down the pasta aisle and saw him, Marcus, standing by the canned tomatoes. He looked older, thinner. His hair was longer, unkempt. He held a basket with a single box of mac and cheese, a loaf of bread, and a 6-pack of cheap beer. He saw her. His eyes widened. He opened his mouth, perhaps to speak, perhaps to apologize, perhaps to explain. She didn't give him the chance. She turned, walked away. Not in anger, not in fear, but in peace, because she no longer needed closure from him. She'd already given it to herself. Later,
Over soup with Amani, she told her. I didn't say a word, Leela said, stirring her broth. And I didn't want to. Amani reached across the table, squeezed her hand. That's when you know you're free. When you see him and he's just a stranger. Leela invited Yulian to dinner the next week. Not a cafe, not a quick bite, a real dinner at a quiet Italian place with candlelight and cloth napkins. He wore a navy sweater, the same color as that coat in the window. Coincidence? Maybe. Or maybe the universe had a sense of poetry. Over tiramisu, he said, I know it's early, but I want you to know I'm not going anywhere. I'm not trying to fix you. You're not broken. I just want to walk beside you, if you'll let me. She looked at him, really looked, and saw not a savior, but a companion. I'm not ready for promises, she said. I'm not asking for any. Just this night. Just this. Just us. She nodded, and for the first time since the fitting room, she let herself lean into something soft. Not because she needed saving, but because she finally trusted herself enough to choose joy. The final Spanish exam came in late May. She aced it. The instructor handed her a certificate with a proud smile. You have the heart of a true learner, Leela. Never stop. That night, she invited Yulian, Amani, Shayla, and Nicole over for a small celebration. She cooked paella, her first attempt, slightly burnt, but full of love. They laughed, toasted, shared stories, and when the others left, Yulian stayed. Not to stay the night, but to sit with her on the balcony as the city lights flickered below. You've come so far, he said. She leaned her head on his shoulder. Not far, just home.
The ocean smelled like salt and possibility. Not the sharp, biting sting of winter wind, but the warm, briny exhale of a sea that had waited centuries to welcome her. Layla stood at the edge of the white sand, barefoot, toes sinking slightly into the damp earth. Behind her, the villa's terrace buzzed with laughter, Shyla flipping cocktails, Nicole adjusting her sun hat, Amani snapping photos with her phone. But here, at the water's edge, it was just her. And the waves. They rolled in, slow and steady, like a heartbeat she'd finally learned to recognize. She hadn't come here to escape. She'd come here to remember. To remember the woman who had walked into that mall in a faded green coat, exhausted, invisible, trusting. To remember the woman who had stood in a fitting room, trembling, and pressed a red button on her phone. To remember the woman who had sat in silence on her bed, weeping for a marriage that had never been real. And now she was here, alone, but not lonely. The sun was low, painting the sky in streaks of tangerine and lavender. The breeze lifted strands of her hair, dark now, with the faintest silver at the temples, and carried the scent of coconut oil and distant grills. She didn't look back. She didn't think of Marcus, not in anger, not in sorrow, just as a chapter. A heavy, painful, necessary chapter. She reached into the pocket of her linen dress and pulled out the small, smooth stone she'd picked up that morning. It was gray, almost black, worn by the tide into something almost perfect. She held it in her palm, closed her fingers. Then, slowly, she walked to the water's edge, kneeled, let the tide kiss her knees, and dropped the stone. It sank, instantly. No splash, no sound. Just gone. Like the loan, like the lies, like the name he'd stolen, like the woman she'd been. She stood, wiped her hands on her dress, turned, and walked back toward the villa. Not as a victim, not as a survivor, but as a woman who had chosen to live. The next morning, she woke before sunrise. The villa was quiet. Only the distant cry of a gull and the whisper of palm fronds.
She slipped on a light robe and walked down to the beach again. The sand was cool underfoot. The sky was still indigo. She sat on a driftwood log, wrapped her arms around her knees, and breathed. For the first time in her life, she didn't think about what came next. She didn't plan. She didn't calculate. She didn't check her phone. She simply was. And that was enough. She'd signed up for the trip on a whim. After Spanish class, after Julian had kissed her for the first time, slow, soft, like a promise whispered into the dark. "Come with us," Shyla said. "We need you. You've earned this." So she said yes. No hesitation, no fear. Just yes. She had packed light. Just clothes. Her journal, her Spanish notebook, her phone, and the small silver locket Amani had given her on her birthday. Empty inside. "For your next chapter," Amani had said. "You'll fill it with your own memories." She hadn't opened it yet. She wasn't ready. But she wore it every day. A quiet anchor. On the third day, she took a solo walk along the coast. No one followed. No one asked. She walked for 2 hours, past families building sandcastles, past couples holding hands, past a lone fisherman mending his net. She stopped at a small wooden shack selling fresh coconut water. The vendor, an old man with sun-creased skin and a wide smile, handed her a chilled green coconut with a straw. "Foro de sol," he said in broken English. She smiled, paid him, sat on the sand, pierced the husk, sipped. Sweet, cold, alive. She closed her eyes and thought of her mother. She had passed away 5 years ago. Cancer. Quick. Quiet. She'd held Layla's hand the last night. "Don't let anyone make you small. Not even love," she'd whispered. "I thought it was just a mother's fear." Now she understood. It was a warning, a prophecy, and she'd ignored it. Until the fitting room, until the recording, until the moment she realized she had been small for 8 years. And now she was choosing to be large. Not loud, not defiant, just present, full, unapologetically herself. That evening, they all gathered on the deck for dinner. The table was lit with lanterns. The air smelled of grilled fish, lime, and rum. Shyla raised her glass. To Layla, the woman who didn't just survive the storm, she learned to dance in the rain. Everyone laughed and clinked. Layla didn't blush. She just smiled and raised her glass. To the women who didn't wait to be saved, who picked up the phone, who walked out, who dared to say, "I am enough."
Silence. Then, a slow, warm applause. Imani reached over, squeezed her hand. Julian, seated beside her, looked at her with eyes that held no pity, only admiration, only love. And she loved him back. Not because he fixed her, but because he let her be. On the final night, she sat alone on the beach again. The stars were thick overhead, brighter than she'd ever seen. No city lights, no noise, just sky and sea. She opened her journal, flipped to the last page, wrote, "I used to think love meant silence, that trust meant not asking, that being good meant giving up my voice. I was wrong. Love is asking. Trust is choosing. Being good is knowing your worth. I didn't lose 8 years. I reclaimed them. One breath, one step, one word. I recorded it. That was the first. I'm leaving. That was the second. I'm learning Spanish. That was the third.
I'm going to the ocean. That was the fourth. And now, I am here, not because I escaped him, but because I chose me. Layla Vance. She closed the journal, placed it beside her, looked up at the stars, and whispered, "Thank you." Not to God, not to fate, to herself, for not giving up, for not shrinking, for pressing record, for walking out, for saying no, for saying yes, for becoming. The next morning, she boarded the plane home. No tears, no last look back. Just quiet, just peace. Back in her apartment, she unpacked, put away her swimsuits, hung her sundresses, and opened the locket. Inside, she placed the small, smooth stone, the one she dropped in the ocean. She closed it, let it rest against her chest. It was warm, alive, a reminder that some things sink and some things rise, and some things are meant to be carried. A week later, she stood in front of her new bookshelf, filled now with Spanish grammar books, with poetry, with novels she'd never read before, with her journal, with a framed photo of her and Imani laughing on the beach. She ran her fingers along the spines and smiled. Her phone buzzed. A text from Julian. "Cafe at 5? I'll bring the croissants and the silence. You know I'm good at that." She smiled, typed back, "I'll bring the coffee and the courage." She put the phone down, walked to the window, opened it. The scent of lilacs drifted in. Spring had come again, and this time, she was ready. For the quiet, for the joy, for the ordinary, beautiful, unscripted life. She pulled out her journal, wrote one more line. "I am not who he said I was. I am who I chose to become." She closed the book, and for the first time since the fitting room, she didn't need to record anything. Because her story wasn't over. It was just beginning. And she was finally, beautifully, the author.